November 28, 2018 morning session of the Portland City Council. Welcome everyone. Sue, could you please call the roll?
Udaley. Fritz. Here. Fish. Salzman.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations, will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Thank you very much. Communications is first up.
Item 1200, request of John Washington to address council regarding Seoul District Business Association Rose Quarter.
Is Mr. Washington here? Maybe he'll come in before we get through communications. Next item, please.
Request of Brad Perkins. This is item 1201. Request of Brad Perkins to address council regarding economic development in the Rose Quarter.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. How are you doing?
Excellent.
Good. Okay, I'll just preface what I'm going to say with 2 words: climate change. And that's what we're talking about here in regards to the Sullivan's Gulch Corridor Trail and also the Rose Quarter development for high-speed rail. In 2012, July 29th to be exact, the City Council voted in favor of proceeding on with the conceptual plan for the Sullivan's Gulch Trail. Right after that, well, we had thought we'd hit a home run, but right after that, when I say we, I mean 16 different neighborhoods and 3 different business associations who worked really hard to get to that point. We thought we hit a home run, but right after that, the city lost our project manager, Paul Smith, who was working on that. And since then, nothing has happened in support of the trail. We had proposed to the city to raise $2.5 million, private money, to help make this happen. You're seeing what's happening on the corridor today along I-84. It's being jammed up with housing, but none of it affordable, okay? It's all market rate. And this could have been a great catalyst for affordable housing to put this trail in. Now, let me remind you, this trail was, thought about and put together by the community, okay? What has happened since, though, is that the city department heads have made the green loop the top priority, have made the bike share top priority. What we're trying to do is make not a merry-go-round of the green loop, but a connector of people coming north-south from the east into downtown and other various places. Now we have the 7th Street Bridge over I-84, and the problem is that once that's built, there's no way to have a decent Sullivan's Gulch Trail as planned. We're going to be running, not we, but the city is going to be. When I say we, I don't mean the Sullivan's Gulch Trail Committee, but the city is wanting to, run bicyclists over MLK Boulevard and Grand Avenue via Lloyd Boulevard. The intent all along was to run it underneath the 2 bridges. 7th is becoming a more important link rather than 9th. You're going to have a major problem with minority community if you choose to go ahead with closing down 7th Street. There's a better way. Let's think next year, for a budget to include this project manager. Nick Falbo would be a great person to have, who already works for the Parks Department, or excuse me, PBOT. Get the Parks Department to split the cost of a $120,000 position with PBOT. Also, there needs to be a committee. I mean, what happened to the idea of having real committees that are involved and give feedback to the city and vice versa? That's where the democratic process, that's where it's all about, okay? And the same thing for the Rose Quarter. You know, when we talk about baseball, that decision was not made by a group. It was not made by the community to explore the idea of how transportation can work, how affordable housing can work with it. So it's down the road, I guess. Right now, we are talking about, there is a study going on by WSP to do a high-speed rail corridor between Portland and Vancouver, BC. At the conference up there on October 10th, there was nobody there from Oregon. What we had were people from Washington and British Columbia that put together this Cascada Innovation Corridor idea, and they want to come down to Portland, okay? High-speed rail is coming to Portland, but we have to be prepared for it. I mean, even the governor was caught off guard when she was asked about this idea of the corridor.
Brad, could I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
Your time has expired, but you've raised a whole host of interesting issues, and I'll give you my commitment that I will research the Sullivan Gulch Trail concept. I'm not as familiar with it as I'd like to be, and I know you've mentioned it previously, so I will make that commitment. I'm curious about that, and I have this well-written letter to the editor with regard to high-speed rail. I understand that there is a conversation going on at the state level regarding high-speed rail. Are you talking about something different?
Not in Oregon, no.
There is not.
Matter of fact, the next, tonight, matter of fact, here in Portland, they're going to review plans that were put together over 6 years, 4 years too long, which is the future of passenger rail service in the state of Oregon. Their recommendation, this committee that was formed 6 years ago, their recommendation, which was supported by FRA, Federal Rail Administration, was to, hey, let's just put it on the existing UP tracks. I mean, what's so hard about that? Problem is, it's 140 years old, and this big bureaucracy that owns it that runs their own show. So that is what's occurring now. And I have no problem with UP, you know, doing what they need to do as far as business. I mean, they should run freight up and down it, but there needs to be a new corridor.
But you don't see any impetus in the legislature this
I don't see, we need to get the governor on track on this, because it's going to be pushed from Governor Inslee, who's going to be running
he is
for president.
To this already. Inslee is committed to not running for president, but he's committed to high-speed rail.
He is very committed. Matter of fact, he was the main pusher in the legislature up there in Washington to get the $750,000 for this study that WSP is doing right now. And British Columbia threw in the other, was it 400? So it was a $1.2 million study that's going on right now. And Microsoft was also involved with that conference. They put that whole show together. And they do want to come down to Portland, and we would love to have a conference down here. We would be interested in helping to make that happen down here next spring.
Very good. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Next individual, please, Sue.
Item 1202, request of Fawn Aberson to address council regarding Rose Quarter economic development.
Good morning.
Good morning, council. This is really just an exercise of me trying to learn public speaking.
I'm sorry, would you mind just stating your name for the record? It's just required.
I'm Fawn Aberson. I'm the outreach coordinator for the Seoul District Business Association. Excuse me. And I'm also a small business owner of Flossin Media. And I'm here because one of my board of directors, who you just heard from, Brad Perkins, says it's a good idea for us to do some more public speaking and get in front of you all. So I'm exercising that right to do so. I'll be much briefer than him. First of all, I wanted to thank Commissioner Saltzman and Mayor Wheeler for attending the Beatrice Morrow grand opening, because that's a huge collective impact partnership of the Soul District Business Association. And it did lift a lot of minority-based organizations and businesses, and your presence there. And I know the other two commissioners, thank you for acknowledging it as being important. I know you were unable to make it. But I thought that was just a huge, huge victory for our district and a huge, huge victory for minority-based organizations. And quite frankly, PCRI, who I know has been around since the 1990s and is one of the only African-American homeownership organizations of its kind. And I've seen them do some incredible things over the last several years, and much in part to the championship of some of what you guys have done. I support what Brad is doing also with Sullivan's Gulch Trail and the high-speed rail, and the Soul District Business Association is really paying attention to that, because what we've discovered is that minority-owned businesses and people in the community often are left out of the conversation, and the train has far advanced, so to speak, the train, before folks even are aware of some of the infrastructure stuff. And the infrastructure does come through PBOT. The infrastructure does come through ODOT. And if we're not, as a community-based organizations, paying to the decisions at that level, the ground level, the Rose Quarter Vision level, then we're left completely out of the conversation. We're just afterthoughts by that. So the Soul District is doing everything it can to stay in that conversation and have relevant conversations. So we support people like Brad Perkins, and we support, PCRI, as I've said. So there's not a standalone here. We're all a part of a big collective impact. And I just encourage you guys to remember that, because I know on ancillary conversations, sometimes organizations who are just getting their infrastructure or getting the opportunity to have really big contracts and be a part of really big discussions. The Rose Quarter Vision is a huge discussion. And you might think, what is somebody like me? How dare I sit here and be a part of that discussion? But through the infrastructure of the Soul District and through the conversations, it's been really cool to be invited to that table. And I just think that more people need to be involved in the governance process. And then when organizations like PCR are given the green light to be in charge of something, that they be allowed to remain in charge and be giving more rope and more berth. And same with the Soul District, and same with Brad's conversations about the Cascadia High-Speed Rail. So that's my first exercise in speaking to you all. Thank you for listening to me.
Well done. Excellent comments. And
all
we
right.
appreciate your being here. Thank you for taking the time to come in. Next individual, please, Sue.
Item 1203, request of Kyle Johnson to address council regarding a petition in favor of Transportation Bureau's 7th Avenue Greenway project.
Good morning.
I'll do that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioners, for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Kyle Johnson, and I live on Northeast 7th and Fremont. I'm here today to ask for your support for the 7th Avenue Greenway and to present you with a letter of over 900 other people who have signed our petition. In 3 weeks, my wife, Kate, and I's first child will be born. Her name's going to be Lulu. What worries us is that our street outside is currently designed for cars over people. This makes the decision of when we will feel comfortable letting Lulu go outside by herself or walk to school much harder. I want my child to have the freedom to enjoy and learn about the community without the danger of being hit by an automobile. In the history of Portland Greenways, there has never been so much support for a project that would make it harder to drive. Letters of support for the 7th Avenue Greenway have been voted and approved by the Northeast Coalition of Neighborhoods and individually by the Lloyd, Irvington, Elliott, and Sabin neighborhood associations. If you go down 7th today, you'll see over 30 handmade signs expressing support. This summer, PBOT hosted 2 open houses. At the second open house, they heard from many of the long-term Black residents who have had to witness their neighborhood gentrify and did not feel the trade-offs in safety is worth the loss of automobility. Public comment was supposed to be wrapped up in a decision made in August, but now there's no end date or clear process for making a decision. For people advocating for safer streets, this lack of structure makes it difficult to know how to be effective. After the open house, my wife and I decided to do all we could to advance a thoughtful community discussion where everyone could be heard. Over the course of a week, we knocked on every door from Alberta to Thompson and invited businesses, churches, and residents to a community ice cream social. Over 50 people showed up, and we went through 7 pints of ice cream. I also got a chance to meet with and have a great conversation with Ronnie Herndonson from Albina Head Start. When you hear that something will make your neighborhood better comes from a neighbor, it's a much different experience than having the city tell you that. Last week, several of my neighbors had to call the police because of drag racing happening on 7th. Today, we have an opportunity to make the street safer for Lulu and all other future generations. You rarely get to please all the people all the time, but sometimes you get to do the most good for the most number of people. This is one of those times. I ask you to support the 7th Avenue Greenway and help Lulu be able to safely discover her new community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and congratulations to you and your wife. That's exciting.
Thank you, yeah.
And thanks for all your efforts. I mean, I can't overemphasize how much community outreach and engagement is to transportation decisions and from us, but the fact that it's happening in the community is just really added benefit. I'm a cyclist. I'm enthusiastic about this project, but we do have some more outreach to do. And he just stole one of my catchphrases, although I think it's somebody else's quote. Yeah, that's one of the many important lessons I've learned on city council. You absolutely can't make everyone happy all the time, but we are here to do the most good for the most people. So I really appreciate this, and I promise we are in current conversations and avidly pursuing it.
Thank you very much.
And if I could just add the corollary, which is ice cream always helps.
Well, oh yeah,
It
I was
really
gonna
does.
ask, why didn't you come all the way down to Deacon? Because you missed my house.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Next individual, please, Sue.
Item 1204, request of Olivia Ose to address council on public safety concerns regarding homeless people. Is Olivia here?
Very good. And did John Washington show up, Mr. Washington? I don't see him here. Very good. So,
Can I sit in?
no, you may not.
That's not how it works.
So we will take up the consent agenda next, Sue. Has anybody pulled any items off consent?
I've had no pulls.
Please call the roll.
Fritz.
Aye.
Excuse me. Udaly.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The consent agenda is adopted. And we have a little bit of space here before the first time certain, so let's please go to the regular agenda. I understand Mr. Smith is here for the appointment to the Portland Historic Landmarks Commission. Please call item 1210.
1210, appoint Andrew Smith to the Portland Historic Landmarks Commission as architect for a term to expire November 20, 2022.
Colleagues, Andrew has over 20 years of architectural experience, including managing the development of new infill and rehabilitation projects. He has experience creating financial packages to establish feasibility, and he understands the financial challenges that sometimes, I would even say often, accompanies these projects. He has experience serving as a volunteer in the community, training people to perform post-disaster building evaluations. He understands the challenges of accommodating density and assuring affordable housing, as well as ensuring proper stewardship of our historic resources, and he's looking forward to engaging with fellow commissioners and others to address these important issues. A quote from Andrew that caught my attention, quote, "There is a balance that needs to be found between preservation and progress. They are not mutually exclusive," unquote. I think that is a very timely and important quote. So at this point, we'll hear from the Landmarks Commission and Andrew Smith. Welcome and thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Hillary Adam, BDS. I just came up to help introduce Andrew. He's an architect at Henneberry Eddy, and I just got an email this morning that they were just given the Firm Award, which is essentially the best firm of the year for the Pacific and Northwest region. So I just wanted to announce that.
That's outstanding. Congratulations.
Thanks very
That's
much.
great news.
Yep.
Do you guys have any questions for Andrew?
Andrew, given how busy your firm is, and now with this new honor, your firm's going to be even busier than it was before, what is your reason for wanting to do this? What compels you to participate in this, understanding that the salary's terrible?
Well, I think, I've got quite a bit of experience and a passion for historic resources. I've been working with historic buildings and within historic districts for my entire career, and probably haven't done enough civic engagement as I could have throughout that time. So I saw this opening on the Landmarks Commission as an opportunity to bring that experience and really contribute something to the city in which I live.
I appreciate that. Colleagues, any further questions? Legal counsel, I note that this was a previous agenda item. I don't have the previous agenda item in my packet. I assume this is a report? That's my understanding. I just wanted to make sure. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt the report.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Saltzman, a second from Commissioner Fritz. Please call the roll.
Udaley.
Well, thank you for your willingness to serve, and congratulations on the appointment. I vote aye.
Fritz.
The Landmarks Commission is never without controversy, so I hope you're ready for that. And having gone from being a community activist myself to being on the Planning Commission a long time ago, I do wish you the best with that transition, because it can be a bit of an eye-opener to be on the other side of the mic. So thank you for your willingness to serve. Aye.
Indeed.
Saltzman.
Yes, Mr. Smith, I'm sure you'll get your fill of civic engagement through the Landmark Commission. So thank you for your willingness to serve, and I'm happy to vote aye.
Wheeler.
Mr. Smith, the only advice I will give you, since you're old hat at this, no matter how tough things get, never mumble anything. Second of all, on a serious note, and Hillary, thank you for being here as well. We've heard a lot already early in this agenda about community engagement, community involvement, community activism, and the role of people in the community to help shape the community in which we live. And this is, I think, one of the more important issues. During our central city planning process, we had to resolve several important conflicts between the historic landmark aspects and the preservation aspects with the real pressures that our city is facing around growth, accommodation, and the need for workforce and lower income housing. All of these things come into conflict, and there is never an easy answer, and there is no clear line to draw. And so we do rely on you and your colleagues on the commission to be able to help us best evaluate these complex issues. It's not easy, but I just want to say I'm really grateful that there's people of your caliber that are willing to step forward and assist us in this manner. There's a lot of different things you could do with your time, but I just want to acknowledge and thank you for choosing to do this. I vote aye, and the appointment is approved. The report is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And I need to stall for 2 more minutes.
Second readings.
Yeah, there's a couple
let's,
second readings.
let's do that. Let's see, is Amy here? Amy's here. Can we move to 1211, Amy? Are you ready for that?
I'm ready. My BPS colleagues are running a little bit.
Then let's skip that for right now. Let's go to second reading 1212.
1212, amend the heavy vehicle use tax code to remove the 4-year revenue target.
Commissioner Udaley.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we take the vote, I want to take a final opportunity to address some of the concerns we've heard about why we're amending the code rather than amending the tax. We have been moving promptly to consider options for adjusting the heavy vehicle use tax and to consult our advisory committees as we learn about the factors that are affecting revenue we collect. This is a new tax, unique in its attempt to collect revenue based on the wear and tear on city streets, so we don't have other examples for comparison. The 2016 tax year was the first year of the heavy vehicle use tax. It takes 18 months or more to collect this tax because freight companies pay based on their fiscal years. Some start in October, some start in July, some apply for extensions, and some file for appeals if they don't feel they should be subject to the tax. We were not aware of the magnitude of the potential shortfall and therefore the required increase in tax rate until late summer, early fall 2018, when collections for tax year 2016 had largely concluded. This further delayed stakeholder engagement, which the city felt was necessary given the magnitude of the proposed tax rate adjustment. In response to this information, Commissioner Saltzman's office asked PBOT and Office of Management and Finance's Revenue Division to consider adjusting the rate or bring to council a way to remove the requirement that the city adjust the rate. He also insisted that we include input from our advisory committees. That's what we've been doing for the last 6 months. Freight stakeholders were concerned that HB 2017, which passed the legislature mid-2017, will increase state weight mile taxes by about 25% starting in 2018, which it's almost over, so I'm not sure if that was true. This is a new acronym, HVUT. Heavy vehicle use tax. Okay, there we go. Is pegged to that rate. So the amount individual companies will pay in HVUT to the city of Portland will rise because of the legislature's action. I want to thank the staff and committees that have been working on this issue, including Michael Tete? And the PBOT's Fixing Our Streets manager, Ty Berry from the PBOT Financial Services team, Scott Carter from the OMF Tax Division, all the members of Fixing Our Streets Oversight Committee, and all the members of the Portland Freight Committee. I believe more than ample exploration of possible solutions has been done, and I support the direction as recommended. There are staff here, obviously, but I'm a little confused since this is a second reading. Did anyone have questions for staff?
I have one question. That's what's the next step? I mean, presumably this is going to pass, but it doesn't fulfill what was promised to the voters. So are we going to take another look at the methodology and see how to make sure that the heavy vehicles pay their fair share?
What's that? Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Could you identify yourself, please?
What's that?
Could you say your name?
I'm Scott Carter with the Revenue Division.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure what steps would be taken in the future to ensure that there's the
Let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to ask the committee to work on this issue so that by the time we go to renew the tax in 2020, there is a way to make sure that the heavy vehicles pay their fair share?
Revenue Division would be happy to be involved and use the resources available to us. I think that initiative would probably be directed by PBOT, I would think.
Ty Berry, Transportation Bureau. This has been an eye-opening experience for us in terms of reviewing our original expectations against what came in with the tax. It is something that we continually review, and so to your question, yes, it is something where we will look to improve this process for the future.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Commissioner Daly, anything else? Very good. This is a second reading of an ordinance. We already had a presentation. We took testimony. Please call the roll.
Udaly.
Thanks for being here, and thanks again to everyone who worked on this item. I vote aye.
Fritz.
In 2016, Commissioner Steve Novick worked really hard to pass this tax, and it didn't pass by very much. And there was a voters pamphlet statement, argument in favor, titled, "Let's Pay Our Fair Share." And it was a Q&A, and one of the questions was, will this tax heavy trucks? And the answer was that the measure includes a requirement that the city convene a committee to look at how to get heavy trucks to pay their fair share. And this voters' pamphlet statement was signed not only by all 5 members of the council at the time, Mayor Charlie Hales, Commissioner Nick Fish, Commissioner Amanda Fritz, Commissioner Steve Novick, and Commissioner Dan Saltzman, but also by State Treasurer Ted Wheeler. So there will continue to be a majority of the council in 2019 that made a promise to the voters. And so I acknowledge that this has been a very challenging process and a very difficult puzzle to solve as to how to get heavy vehicles to pay their fair share. If we want to pass a renewal of this tax, which I believe we have to, because even with the money coming in from the gas tax, we're still not able to keep up with the wear and tear on our roads, despite the very good efforts of the Bureau of Transportation and all the work that you do. We're not going to be able to pass it unless we make sure that the vehicles that are causing the most damage are paying their fair share. So with that, I appreciate the willingness to look again at the methodology. We have to fix this. And so changing the goal of how much to get from the heavy vehicles before we have a fix doesn't seem prudent to me. So respectfully, I vote no.
Saltzman.
Well, I just want to say I appreciate the work that the Bureau of Transportation and the Revenue Division have done in trying to attain the $10 million goal over 4 years. And just to point out that the tax still remains in place. The heavy vehicle use tax is still there. We are simply acknowledging that it will not yield $10 million over 4 years without a dramatic increase in the rate to the heavy vehicle truck community. So I'm happy to support this and vote aye.
Wheeler.
First of all, I'd like to thank Commissioner Udaly for bringing forward this technical amendment to the city code. This comes as a recommendation from the Fix Our Streets Oversight Committee, and I believe it's a sensible compromise to reach the goals that the voters adopted with regard to this tax. This, in fact, is the committee that's referred to in the voters' pamphlet, and in large measure, they are the ones who we have asked to help us define what constitutes a fair share, and this is their recommendation to the City Council. Last year, I worked with the City Council on Build Portland, which is another way that the city is stepping forward to maintain our city and care for our roads and our bridges, and I believe in a combined way, efforts like these can help Portland be successful where other cities continue to struggle because, frankly, our city comes together to solve problems. And I want to acknowledge what Commissioner Fritz said in her respectful vote in opposition. I don't believe the work is done here. I think there is more work to do here, and assuming that we do want to go forward with a re-up, we better have a very, very clear understanding and a clear answer for the voters in this community if we want them to support this kind of thing in the future. So I do believe this technical amendment is entirely appropriate. I thank the committee for recommending it. I vote aye, and the ordinance is adopted. Thank you. We are now back on track according to the large novelty clock in the back of the room. We'll go back to item 12, excuse me, I'm on the wrong page. If we could please go to item 1205.
1205, appoint Kayla Wade to the Citizen Review Committee Advisory Board to the Independent Police Review, a division of the City Auditor's Office.
Director Severe, you're up. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, members of council. My name is Constantine Severe, Director of the Independent Police Review, and it is my honor to present to you Kayla Wade as an applicant for service for 3 years on the Citizen Review Committee. As you can see from her bio, she's an incredibly qualified candidate, also someone who hits a lot of the goals that we strive for when we try to recruit individuals to serve on the CRC. As you folks know, the CRC has a very important task in providing police accountability to the city. CRC hears a number of misconduct cases through its appeal function, as well as making policy recommendations to this council, the police commissioner, and the city auditor. And Ms. Wade's background background, both in her collegiate career and post-college, shows and demonstrates an ability and a willingness to serve her community. And as a bonus, she's a native Oregonian, which there aren't too many of us. Ms. Wade, do you have something that you want to say?
Yeah, I prepared a brief statement. I just want to say that a healthy police force is an extension of its community. It's growing and improving alongside the citizens it serves by welcoming opportunities for open dialogue and constructive feedback. And I am extremely honored to have the opportunity to contribute to this communicative process by serving as a member of the Citizen Review Committee. And I am dedicated to doing so with the utmost integrity and objectivity. And I look forward to engaging with both the Portland Police Bureau and the City of Portland, as well as my fellow citizens, as our community continues to evolve. And I just want to sincerely thank the City Council for considering me for this appointment.
And one thing, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our outreach coordinator, Irene Konev, who is responsible for bringing us Ms. Wade. At one point, the Citizen Review Committee had, I believed, at the time when it was 9 members, had 8 males on the committee. And through her efforts, Ms. Konev, to bring reaching out to more diverse communities, we've been able to, I think as time has gone along, broaden the diversity on the committee and actually improve the quality of the applicants brought before the CRC, because as you know, the CRC and its function, there's a lot of difficulty in what the CRC has to deal with, and I'm just really pleased that Ms. Wade is willing to take this on for 3 years.
Colleagues, any questions or thoughts? Could I just ask one question? I was really impressed with the questionnaire that you filled out as you applied for this position. I was particularly struck by some of the volunteer work you did at Dartmouth. Could you talk a little bit about that and how that intersects with the work on the CRC? I just thought that was really interesting, and I think that the public at large might be interested in that.
One of the main reasons that I wanted to apply to this committee is because it really closely related to one particular volunteer commitment that I had at Dartmouth, which was serving on the Presidential Steering Committee, which was a committee comprised of students, faculty, staff, and alumni that was appointed by the president of the college to specifically look at high-risk issues affecting our campus, specifically high-risk drinking, issues of sexual assault, and issues of exclusivity that were kind of affecting our campus in a negative way. And so it was a group of I believe 12 members that were met on a weekly basis and worked really hard to look at evidence-based practices and met with experts across the country and at our at other comparable schools to try to come up with some specific and appropriate recommendations to the Board of Trustees to kind of move the campus forward and work towards building a better community there. And that taught me a lot about maintaining objectivity and working with a wide array of people in order to work towards the greater good for our community. And I'm really excited to take that experience and apply it to building a better community in my home state and in Portland.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I see a lot of intersects here just in terms of the types of issues, the serious nature of the issues, the controversy that can sometimes swirl around the kinds of issues that you mentioned in your testimony as well as in your application. So I think you'll be a very, very good fit, and I'm appreciative that you're willing to step forward. Colleagues, anything further? This has been filed as a resolution. Is there any testimony?
We have 3 people signed up.
Thank you very much.
Will you please come up? Dan Handelman, Maggie, and Ryan Cruz.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch, and this kind of seems like the same thing we say almost every time there's a nominee for the Citizen Review Committee. We don't have any objection to the nomination of Ms. Wade. She actually seems like she'd be a good addition to the group, but we have said repeatedly in the last several times we've come before you that the top age on the CRC At the time, the last time I came before you was 57 years old. The person who was 57, Michael Luna, just ended his term. So now there's not going to be a single member of the CRC over the age of 45. And this ordinance requires that this body reflect the diversity of the community, and I looked at some demographic information, and there should be at least 3 of the 11 members who are over the age of 50, according to demographics. So this has been brought to the IPR's attention and to your attention. I'm not saying you shouldn't appoint this person today, but I think that the next round of recruiting should be very deliberate about making sure there's an age diversity on this panel. In fact, today, none of the other members of CRC, except for Mr. Luna, could go to the Police Review Board hearings that's occurring today because they all have day jobs. And so sometimes it's helpful. And we used to come before City Council and complain that everybody was retirees, and now the pendulum swung too far the other way, perhaps.
Thank you for acknowledging that, Dan.
On that matter, the director mentioned that there used to be only 1 or 2 women on the CRC. Now there are going to be 7 out of the 11 members are going to be women. It's great. You know, we need more equality and more women in these kinds of positions, but just again, that's a little bit off balance from the reflection of the community. So I noticed that today's agenda item is being introduced by Mayor Wheeler instead of the auditor. I'm not sure if there's any significance to that. We have been noticing—
That was a scrivener's error that was corrected.
It is the auditor that is in fact.
Okay.
That was a mistake, sorry.
Okay, well, I just want to bring up in terms of, because we have so few opportunities to talk about the IPR-CRC structure, the auditor doesn't bring the IPR's annual reports before the council anymore. We've asked for that repeatedly. She's stopped going to CRC meetings, the auditor, and she didn't come to the October meeting even after a request because they asked for her to come to discuss their standard of review, which you all know they want to change. The OIR group report that was heard earlier this year, I know, Mayor Wheeler, it's your policy not to take testimony or reports, but she could have requested that. It just feels like there's some kind of disconnect between the auditor and the CRC and the community. We've talked, if it's a problem that she doesn't like having the police in her portfolio, we've talked about adding a change to the charter so IPR becomes fully independent, so it's not under any of your offices or her office. That's just something to think about for the future. So I just want to make sure that all those issues are thought about every time you have a chance to talk about IPR and CRC.
Yeah, and those Dan, are great comments, and I know Director Severe is still here somewhere. I agree with you. I think it's very, very important that older adults be reflected in the committees and frankly all the work, and we as a council have committed to being an age-friendly community, and that includes not only economic and social engagement, but it also includes civic engagement. So I think you're right to admonish us all to look for people intentionally who could help fill that demographic void. I appreciate that. And just as sort of an interesting aside, at the request, I believe it was of CRC, I meet with the chair and the co-chair on a regular basis, and I find that interaction actually very, very helpful. And so I appreciate you raising some of these issues. Good morning.
Good morning. So I guess my concerns would be, as stated on my form, is what her qualifications were, and also if she is going against the police department on a certain decision, say, that would be unpopular or not liked by the police department, how would she hold up under that pressure to, make a finding, say, in the favor of a community member who maybe was not treated well by the police department? How does she think she would hold up under pressure from the police department if she's, I don't know if she's been in the police department and she's not anymore, or whether she's never been affiliated with the police department, or so that's a question for anybody who's on an independent police review, because a lot of times you have them skewing towards the police department unfairly. And I particularly want to say in regards to homeless people, disabled people, elderly people, people who are unfairly barred or exited from the very low standard shelters that we have in Portland. Oftentimes they don't want to go into shelter because the shelters are so bad. But we've got a lot of people out in wheelchairs and walkers and canes who are out, and exposed to the elements and either can't or don't want to get in shelter because the shelters are so bad, and they'll be harassed by the police. There's a lot of police harassment also on the Max. In certain areas, there's some dragnet areas down by like the bus depot, Greyhound, and over by Couch and Davis, where they have the dining Sisters of the Road, and they'll harass people down there. So I'm wondering how she's going to deal with people who are homeless and are, through no fault of their own, through a lot of, poor service problems that we're having in Portland for the homeless, how she's going to deal with that when those people are dealt with unfairly. So that would be my question.
Very good. And was there a third individual?
He's speaking on another item.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just to respond to Maggie's concern, if there is in the record the responses to the questions, and all candidates are asked about their experiences with the police, whether they have ever worked or volunteered in the criminal justice system, to which the answer was no. Have you ever participated in an organisation that advocates a position regarding the police or the criminal justice system? Okay. The answer was no. So I appreciate your questions. They've been answered to my satisfaction.
All right.
And Mayor Wheeler, may I address one more thing I forgot to bring up? I understand that you mentioned that, or somebody mentioned that, it was the director mentioned that the CRC brings recommendations about policy changes to council. My understanding is that they tried to put their deadly force work group report on the council agenda earlier this month, and the auditor pulled it. So that's another example of something going on where there's a disconnect between the auditor and the CRC. So I'm just hoping that that's something you all pay some attention to.
Thank you. Thank you both. Appreciate it. Please call the roll.
Daly.
I just wanted to share with our community members here today and the public that the Citizen Review Committee was, a little bit about the Citizen Review Committee. It was established in 2001 to help improve police accountability, promote higher standards of police services, and increase public confidence. Volunteer CRC members are appointed by City Council, and they perform 4 primary functions: gather community concerns about police services, help the IPR director develop policy recommendations to address patterns of problems with police services and conduct, review and advise IPR and IA on the complaint handling process, and hear appeals from complainants and officers and publicly report its findings. I want to thank Mr. Handelman. Mayors and commissioners come and go, but he remains, and he is a wealth of information and a one-man accountability mechanism for council, and I deeply appreciate his contribution and service, and I often agree with him. I am going to say today, as far as the makeup of the committee, given the, there you are, given the historic makeup of many of our committees, which does trend older, whiter, and maler, I'm not deeply concerned with the fact that this committee doesn't, but I will keep an eye on that, because it really is ideal to have representative groups. It's only 11 people, so how representative we can get is a challenge. I want to thank Director Sevier and Irene, and especially Kayla Wade. You have amazing experience and perspective to bring to this committee, and I'm really excited to see what you and the whole committee is able to do together. I vote aye. Oh, and I do want to mention, this is a full work day a week. This is no small commitment these people are making. It's 7 to 9 hours a week. I mean, a lot of us don't even volunteer 7 to 9 hours a month or a year. So I want to thank everyone who's able to do that. It's really impressive. So, okay, I'm done.
Fritz.
Thank you, Ms. Wade, for being willing to serve, and thank you for coming back to Oregon and to Portland after your spectacular academic career at Dartmouth and your service there. I note that you worked for an Oregon State Senator, you've been a neighborhood association, you have a small business. It's just a very impressive resume, and your willingness to serve is excellent. Thank you, Irene Connor, for doing the outreach, and Director Sevier. I do share Mr. Handelman's concerns about getting the reports and the annual reports, the deadly force, the change in policy recommendations coming to Council, and I hope we can have some more conversations about that and figure out a mechanism to make sure that they do come to the Council as required. And I acknowledge that, yes, it's a nice problem to have too many young people and too many women on a committee. And I do acknowledge that you did point out when we had too many old people and too many male people. So you certainly are an equal opportunity pointer-outer. Thank you always for your constructive and evidence-based comments, which are very welcome and part of the accountability system. We continue to have a problem with public trust in our police, and the Independent Police Review and the Citizens Review Committee has to be a central part of that. We have to get the reports back to Council, back to the public in a timely manner so that it's not 6 months, a year, even longer before we find out what happened on X date and was there any accountability for actions taken that may not have been in line with policy. Were there any policy changes recommended if it was in line with policy but things didn't work out? And so that is your life experiences, your academic career, your business career are going to be very, very helpful in helping all of the Council as well as the auditor to find the right way forward for that. Thank you for your willingness to serve. Aye.
Saltzman.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. I was very impressed with your answers to the questions on the questionnaire. They're very well-written and a lot of candor. So, yeah, we're happy to have you, and I appreciate your willingness to put in the hours to do this very tough job. I also want to thank Director Sevier for his leadership of IPR over the last many years. And I want to especially thank Irene Kona for maybe doing her job too well in getting a diverse membership of the Citizen Review Committee, but I think that's great, as my colleagues have said. And, you know, last I want to thank Dan Handelman for all of his advocacy. I think, as Commissioner Daly said, we come and go up here, but we can count on a consistent representative of Copwatch to be here, Dan Handelman. And while I maybe not always agree with you, Dan, I do respect that you come prepared and you always raise provoking issues, thought-provoking concerns about a lot of things we do. So I appreciate that as well. Please vote aye.
Wheeler.
Well, I could give the long speech or the short speech, and so I'll give the short one today. First of all, I'll just say my only regret is that Dan is too young to actually serve on the committee as an older guy, so he's out of the running. Number two, with regard to Ms. Wade, she'll do great. You'll do great. I really appreciate your bringing your skill set to this and stepping up, and I have every confidence that she will approach this in the same way that she's approached her previous experiences, which is by looking at the evidence, looking at the data, and using your good judgment. And as long as you do that, as I say, you will do great. And third but not least, I just want to point out that we've had this conversation today both about IPR and CRC. And it is very important that I think we as a council continue to acknowledge that policing in this city is not an autocracy. In fact, there is citizen oversight, there is citizen engagement. We will, in a matter of hours, be having the very first meeting of PSEP, which is yet another group of qualified, highly engaged, experienced residents of this community who are coming together to provide yet another type of look at the policies and directives of the Police Bureau. And so all three of these bodies working separately and independently, I think can only be a good thing for our police bureau in terms of building the strength of the bureau and building trust between the police and the community that the police serves. So, Kayla, thank you very much for stepping forward. I'm personally, I'm very grateful to you. Thank you. I vote aye. The resolution is adopted. The appointment is confirmed. Thank you. And congratulations. We will move on to item 1211. And I know Amy is here somewhere. There she is. And everybody you need is here, is that correct? Very good. Come on up. Item 1211.
Item 1211, repeal code for single-use plastic checkout bags and polystyrene foam food containers and replace with code prohibitions and restrictions on single-use plastic.
Colleagues, this is supposed to be a second reading today. As you're aware, you have all been informed that rather than doing the second reading and taking the final vote today, I'd actually like to offer an amendment. So you might remember the presentation from representatives of my staff, including Amy and others in the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability 2 weeks ago that we had on this particular item. If adopted, this ordinance would implement a by request and ask first model in the city of Portland for single-use plastic items, which would include straws, stirrers, utensils, and condiment packaging. Today, I'd like to propose an amendment that would include plastic straws, stirrers, utensils, and condiment packaging to both the ask first and by request directives of the policy. Previously, the by request dine-in part of the ordinance had only straws and stirrers, and the first ask part only focused on utensils and plastic condiment packets. Following the first reading of the ordinance, my staff and the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability leads worked with and listened to various stakeholders in the community, from the business community, from the advocacy communities, and determined that straws should be included in this policy directive for dine-out and delivery services. Frankly, the only criticism of this policy that I've heard is that it doesn't go far enough, quickly enough. Including all identified plastic serviceware in both parts of the ordinance will hopefully help alleviate these concerns. I move, therefore, to amend the definition of plastic serviceware, electronic orders, and fast food found in City Code 17.103.300 under definitions for restrictions on single-use plastic serviceware. In addition, all identified plastic serviceware, straws, stirrers, utensils, and condiment packaging will be included for both the by request and the ask first aspects of this policy. This will ensure these additional materials are targeted in dine-in, fast food, takeout, and delivery scenarios, and it'll help the policy to achieve its goal of reducing plastic and single-use disposable waste in the city of Portland. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Do you have it written out anywhere, please?
Yes, yeah,
Could you pass? Do you have copies?
I have a copy.
Thank you.
I was curious, how does this affect like cafeterias? And I can't really think of too many cafeterias offhand, but I know like Standard Insurance, for instance, has a cafeteria.
Pete Chisholm-Winfield, BPS. Commissioner Saltzman, it's a good question. We actually have engaged with a couple of institutional organizations that have cafeterias, including OHSU and PPS. So they have cafeterias. There are a variety of types of cafeterias which would be involved in this, and so we are looking to make sure that they have the opportunity to, and they're able to engage in this reduction of single-use plastics. And actually, PPS said to me this morning, Aaron, the sustainability manager, Pressburg, said that whether or not this passes, they're going to be doing this anyway. So they're very much engaged and ready to go.
So in comparing this with the last one, there's actually a change that's not highlighted, which is what was requested in 103.310B, because we had the person who testified about utensils, and so that's now changed but not highlighted in this. So it's consistent, I believe, with what the mayor just said. Basically taken out utensils and condiment packaging and changed that section to just if plastic serviceware, which was defined earlier as everything, correct?
Just for clarification, the plastic serviceware, which includes, in the definition of plastic serviceware, utensils is included, and utensils is also defined in there to be more specific around forks, spoons, knives, and chopsticks, per the conversation we had on the 14th. It's on page 4.
So basically, what your motion is to substitute this new Exhibit A, I
That's
believe,
correct.
which is, I suggest a friendly amendment to have the substitute, because what you said is not what this is.
Can I get a legal counsel interpretation?
Yeah,
I'm
so-
happy
and
to
I
do a
apologize.
substitute.
This is the first time just now I'm seeing the language, and I'm having a hard time, I think, maybe I'm having the same concern as Commissioner Fritz, I'm having a hard time tracking what the amendment exactly is. I understand the policy intent. So this is changed. Okay.
We reviewed it with the attorney, so.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm clear on what the actual legislative change is. So what Commissioner Fritz just handed me is there's a new definition for all of, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding. So there's a new definition, new set of definitions for all of 17.103.300 that are being introduced today?
There are some additions to the definitions, yes. And one of the additions would be the utensils at the end of the definitions.
So it's a strike and replace what was previously in, to include this whole new highlighted section?
Yes, and then 17.103.310B is also changed, and that's not highlighted.
Okay, and that's new. So it's so what I have here is a substitute exhibit, and we're just moving to substitute the entire exhibit because that reflects the policy as Commissioner Wheeler just described.
I have no objections unless staff has objections.
So the removal of utensils was not intended to remove that from Section B. It was actually intended to be incorporated into serviceware.
I think
so
you've done that.
Either way, I think it's acceptable for sure.
I'm just trying to make it so we can pass this and then pass it next week. And I think if you, instead of doing the specific wording which explains what we're doing, just substitute the new Exhibit A, which then will be available for public review, and it does what the mayor just said. Is that?
Would you like to have a look at what this is and make sure it's consistent with what, with the amendment? As I don't know where this came from.
Put that together, right?
The new changes were just accepted. Yeah, actually, could I?
Yeah.
Could I see it? She's just talking about this part. No. This part, right? Or the fast food. Yeah.
I mean, that seems acceptable.
Yeah.
Okay, so then it would be just a motion to substitute. the
Motion
new
to
exhibit.
substitute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good.
Second.
Very good. Any further questions or conversations?
Just one more question.
Commissioner Saltzman.
So, Pete, I heard you just mention chopsticks. I mean, aren't chopsticks made out of wood?
Well, I think most chopsticks are made out of wood, but some chopsticks are made out of plastic. And I think most of the chopsticks made out of plastic are assumed to be reusable. But, you know, we just figured that if that became a single-use item, or if it is a single-use item, we want to make sure that that's in the definition of utensils.
So
I don't think it's common.
So wooden chopsticks are okay?
Yes, this is only about plastic items.
But
correct.
My favorite Thai place has the plastic chopsticks, which are definitely reusable, out in case so you don't have to ask your server to please go get chopsticks.
Sure.
And that would no longer be okay?
Well, it would be, I would interpret that as being a reusable and not a single-use
They're not
plastic.
single-use. Okay.
Yeah, that would be fine.
So right? As long as I can get my chopsticks without having to ask them.
Fair.
Fair.
Great. I think the noodles are safe for another day. So we'll take a vote on the substitute. Please call the roll.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The substitute is adopted. This is the equivalent of a first reading. It moves to second reading as substituted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We did have someone who wanted to testify, I believe, on the amendment.
Which we have to.
Oh, you know what? We do have to do that. I apologize. Please come on up.
We're all just unvoted.
We unvoted.
It's okay, you don't need to.
Okay.
Who said time travel's not possible?
Right.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the council. My name is Ryan Cruz, and I'm actually staff for the Surfrider Foundation. I had the pleasure of sitting here about 10 years ago in a bag monster costume. And at that time, I was a volunteer with the Portland chapter.
That was you.
That was me. So I'm honored to be back here again, and I'm here speaking on behalf of our Portland chapter who couldn't be here today because they're all volunteers and they're working their day jobs. So I'm honored to do that, and I have a prepared statement that I'd like to read.
Sure, thank you.
So the Portland Chapter of the Surfrider Foundation fully supports the amendments and the policy intent to the single-use plastic serviceware policy. These amendments bring the ordinance into alignment with the original policy that came out of the Plastic Reduction Working Group and is closer to the policy requested at the start of this process. Fully including fast food takeout and delivery in this ordinance is imperative to reaching the waste reduction and environmental protection goals. In addition to transitioning more than 120 businesses away from single-use plastic straws, our Portland chapter holds monthly cleanups throughout the city of Portland. We find straws at each of those cleanups, many coming from fast food and takeout restaurants. So this is, why this amendment is very important to us. Our Ditch the Straw PDX businesses have seen substantial cost savings, positive customer feedback, and reductions in the amount of serviceware that's used. And so scaling these reductions up to the approximate 6,000 food service businesses, this ordinance could literally prevent millions of single-use plastic items from entering the waste stream, which we are very excited about. This policy, as amended, would be the first comprehensive Ask First policy that includes fast food for a city of this size. So that's great that we're all, working together to break ground here. And we would just like to thank the City Council for the directive on this issue, staff and fellow work group members for developing the policy, and the businesses and volunteers participating in the Ditch the Straw program, showing that a policy such as this can have positive fiscal and environmental impacts. And the Portland chapter, of course, looks forward to continuing to work with the city on this issue.
Excellent, thank you. Is
Thanks.
there any sorry, Commissioner
I just want
Fritz.
to say thank you for not swamping me with single-use emails on this issue.
You are welcome, yes.
Single-use emails, that's great. Legal counsel, just to clean this up, should we retake the vote, or do we need to, since he testified in support? Okay, very good. My apologies.
Thank you, it's all
Yeah,
good.
thank you very
Thanks.
much for your testimony. Thanks for being here. So we've moved that to second reading. Next item will be 1213.
1213, authorize limited tax revenue bonds to provide up to $4.6 million to finance technology for the reconstructed Portland building.
Colleagues, this is also a second reading. We've already taken testimony and heard a presentation. Any further discussions on this item? Please call the roll.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Excuse me. Salzman.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Last item is item 1214.
1214, authorize a contract with the lowest responsible bidder and provide payment for the construction of the North Jansen West of North Pavilion Avenue Water Main Improvement Project at an estimated cost of $1,010,000.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to thank you for attending the Legislative Town Hall meeting yesterday with dozens of interested people eagerly engaging. And then thank Teresa Elliott, the Chief Engineer, for doing these kinds of projects, which we don't get a lot of active engagement from our community, except if it doesn't go well. So it will go well. This action will authorize a contract to reconstruct a water main in the Jansen Beach area. Although the water that is flowing through the main is safe, the pipe needs to be replaced to keep our workers safe. And Teresa Elliott, the Chief Engineer for the Water Bureau, will provide more background information.
Thank you, Commissioner and Mayor and other commissioners. I'm Teresa Elliott, Chief Engineer, Portland Water Bureau, and I am here asking for your authorization to solicit bids and authorize payment for a construction contract using the city's formal competitive low bid process. This project is on Jansen Beach. It's an area that we annexed in the 80s and it doesn't meet today's standards, and the water lines are much older material that we don't use in our system any longer. And we are planning to replace basically 5 fire hydrants that are not meeting current codes or meeting flow pressures. 9 services and approximately 2,000 feet of asbestos concrete pipe. We will be bringing the fire services and domestic services up to current code also. Construction is anticipated to be done this summer. We'll be advertising this spring, and construction will be following this fall with completion in 2020. We've got it in the current budget for this fiscal year, and we'll be asking for additional funding in the fiscal year 19-20 budget as well. We have as Commissioner Fritz mentioned, we are estimating the contract to be $1,010,000, and we have a high confidence level. We're at 90% design right now. My biggest risk is whether or not there's going to be enough contractors to bid for the work. Otherwise, I don't anticipate any big controversies on the project. And I'm free to take questions for you.
Any questions? Any public testimony on this item?
Lightning would like to speak.
Very good. Thank you for your presentation. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Creativity XX1 PDX. I don't have any problem on the bidding process. I don't have any problem with you replacing the line. I have a big problem with you not offering disclaimers on anyone that had any water that was going through this line. And my position is on this asbestos concrete pipe that you acquired, and now you are at full liability and responsibility as the new owner, is that, in my opinion, I would like to have the EPA coming in immediately on this to test for any asbestos fibers on this line. I would like to have all data in the last 5 years on this line. I would like everybody who is drinking water from this line to have a letter sent to them, to contact their doctors, and to be aware that the line that was currently in supplying you water is an asbestos concrete pipe. Again, you have a right to understand what the fibers are. As far as on the testing, you have a right to know if this line in any way was jeopardized, is not in good operating condition. You have a right to understand the effects of drinking water through a line which is asbestos concrete. You have every right to know that. You should know that. The city needs to make you aware of this and understand this line is being replaced because it is a human health hazard at this time. It should not have been remained when you took this over. It should have been removed immediately. And again, to the EPA, I'm asking you to come in. I'm asking you to make sure updated and current tests are done. And I'm asking you to make sure everyone involved drinking any water from this line is made aware of the situation and to contact their doctors. Exposure to asbestos via drinking water may result in cancer of the esophagus, stomach, and the intestines. Again, We need to have mortality rate data. Is there a higher percentage in the Jansen Beach area around the boat owners there, houseboat owners? I want to have data. I want to have this data from your doctors. You need to understand this line should have never been put in there. This line is against public safety standards, and I want to have reports on the asbestos fibers and what the amount that was coming through this line is and what it's been in the last 5 years. And I want to know what the standards for the city on allowing anybody to drink out an asbestos line such as this. What is your standard, what you think is safe for the public, especially if you're a young baby, a mother that has a young baby and hasn't had a disclaimer provided to her. I want to know what the city has done for these poor victims, in my opinion, of what has happened here.
Thank you.
Did you disclaim anything to these poor victims?
If you stop talking, we can get the...
Okay, I'd like to hear your answer, Commissioner Frist.
No, I'd like you to sit
No, I'd
down
like
so
to
we
hear
can
your
get...
answer, being an ex-medical
Well,
professional
this is
that
why,
you think
this
you
is
are.
why we have professional staffers. Come on up and let's get some answers. Hello again.
Hi, I'm still Teresa Elliott. Some of the information that Lightning is asking for, I would have to go back and get. I don't have that data here. I can tell you that when the line was put in, it met the current standards. It does not meet the current standards today. As far as data, I don't know if we have that data or not, and we can find out. What else?
Yeah, my understanding is that the water has been tested as safe. It's when
That's
the
correct.
workers are working on the pipes, so the main risk is to the workers, and that's one of the reasons. But just as we had the discussion about lead, the standards have changed, and the...
That is my understanding, is that when asbestos pipe is dry and being worked on, doing pipe cutting or removing, that's when there is a hazard, and it's a worker hazard. I have not heard of the drinking water standard, the drinking water standard that was raised by Lightning, and I would have to check that.
Thank you for your response.
I'm going to have to go to Italy in person, by the way, to do that.
I would like to do that too, thank you.
There you go.
If the commissioner would approve the travel.
Thank you for the
I
explanation.
may be the only Italian on council, so I might get first dibs at that.
Very well. That seems entirely fair.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you for the clarification. I think you raised some interesting questions, and I appreciate your answers to those. All right, so this is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. And we are adjourned. We do not have an afternoon session. We will be reconvening at 2 p.m. on Thursday for a land use hearing.